Welcome, everyone, to this episode of Monetizing Your Mental Capital. I'm your host, Will Christensen, and I am actually super excited here, and I believe I'm going to say this right. It's Oran, correct?
Yeah, perfect.
So, Oran, I'm going to have you pronounce your first and last name here, and you tell us where you're from, which is part of why you have such an interesting name that's difficult for me to go in and say correctly.
Yeah, so my name is Oran Sever. That's my last name. I live in Tel Aviv in Israel. So currently it's a bit rainy and around 4 p.m. in my country. And I'm super excited to be here with you today.
Awesome. Yeah, let's dive in. Interestingly enough, we had an interesting moment here as I was getting started recording. Google decided that I had somehow talked to it, Google Siri, all that same vein. And I was saying, welcome to this episode of Monetizing Your Mental Capital. And it popped up and it was like, oh, playing a podcast for you. And it jumped up and was actually playing one of our prior episodes. And so I guess you've done well when Google can recognize the name of your podcast and play it for you on demand. Yeah,
definitely.
It definitely popped up there, and I thought, wow, all right, hey, Google recognizing our podcast, that's I guess in a way we've monetized some of our mental capital in trying to figure out where that goes next. So, Oran, tell me, if I was a seller and I was coming to this podcast looking for ideas around monetizing mental capital, why you? Why would I listen to you around this concept of monetizing your mental capital?
So actually, I have a pretty interesting story. It's all started around 16 years ago, where by accident, I fell into this nice domain of logistics, supply chain, freight forwarding, but really in the traditional type of world, working with companies like Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Apple, really helping them on the supply chain part of their business. And I've been doing that for when I started for around 8-9 years, working with like big companies, Sever Logistics, which is one of the biggest companies in supply chain worldwide, really learning this whole very old-fashioned traditional and complex type of industry. But after 8-9 years, I really had enough. It's a very demanding type of job, really service-oriented. And I was dreaming of doing some other things. My entrepreneur inner has exploded for my body. And when my first child actually was born, it hit me and I decided that's it. I'm moving forward. So I nicely told them that I'm leaving. And what I actually went to do is something that I always loved and did like in small portions on the side is the ecommerce. So once I got my time free, I actually started playing with the e-commerce world. This was a long time ago, by the way. So we're talking somewhere around 2015, where I actually I started selling on Amazon, I had a store on eBay. If someone remembers what's eBay today, but back then it was still very interesting marketplace. So eBay, I had a fashion shop on Magento and some other things. And really slowly, I was starting to build my e-commerce environment. One of the things that e-commerce gives you is turning the world to a very tiny farm where you can actually live in Europe, manufacture in China, and sell in the US. It's really like a complex type of supply chain, which you meet very soon in your business compared to retail, where you usually start local, you grow yourself slowly. And when you have the resources, the knowledge, and the funds, you go outside far away from home to new territories. But e-commerce is like really gives you the power to do that since day one. And slowly, I started to realize that, hey, I have knowledge in a very black hole in e-commerce, because e-commerce was changing everything, growing really fast, changing the whole environment of supply chain and the needs that those new type of companies are looking for. And back then, nobody actually had a solid place that would give them those type of solution. They were just looking for someone to help them. And at this point, I realized that something that I really good at and something that I really love actually joined forces together, and somehow immediately it's thrown me back to the guy that helps companies from the service provider type of view. So slowly, I was drawn back to this part. It was after somewhere like 4 or 5 years where I was dealing with e-commerce. I decided to take my knowledge in both domains and really help companies, from big companies that want to go out and sell their products far away from home in new territories, to even the small Amazon sellers that just started their business, and really taking my knowledge to help them build a proper supply chain that will give them the ability to work easily, at least with this part of the business. So, there are so many challenges when you have a business in general, but e-commerce, of course, it only sounds easy. There's this say, you sit on the beach and drink margarita while you sell your products online. So that's a big lie. And basically, it's a very complicated type of business compared to a store where people just go by. Here, you really need to master the way you market your product from A to Z, really everything.
So one of the things I think was interesting as you were describing that, and I think one of the questions we explore in this podcast is, how do you find something knowledge-wise that you should monetize? You talk a lot about how to pick apart and find a physical product that should be monetized, right? Like, oh, wow, this one's got demand, or you go on Amazon and you find something that's got a fair amount of volume going on, and obviously the guys that are there don't really know what they're doing, and so you go figure out how to create your own version of that and put your own brand on it, and become the brand registry so that they can't get on your listing. And there's all those strategies around, like, here's how you launch a product on Amazon. Well, what we're exploring in this episode and in many others is, how do I do that with knowledge? How do I even find the spot where it's the right idea to actually go try to monetize something that's in there? And you mentioned something that I thought was interesting. You said, I found a spot where my passion and my knowledge of like something I found a need. And so I guess it's threefold. You found this crossways where you had knowledge, people had a need, and you were passionate about that need. And so what I want to explore there for just a minute is, what was it that helped you dawn, like what questions were you asking yourself that helped you realize, oh my gosh, like I'm passionate about this, there's a need here, and I have this knowledge. What was it that helped you identify that three-way cross?
So I think really the need helped me to understand that I need to take this forward. Because back then, the distance between like the word e-commerce and supply chain, although today it really like, all right, of course they're connected, it was very far away. Like nobody in the supply chain even knew what e-commerce is. They didn't take any consideration that this is a really different type of business with a different type of DNA. And also I was so in this, traditional world. This is what I knew back then. So for me, it gave me the tools to at least utilize this part in the business really easy, doing it fast, not thinking about it too much, maybe even missing at this point that this is one of the biggest challenges those companies have, especially if they start to grow. So in the beginning, it might be a bit easy. You still you didn't have too much of those messy things in supply chain. But when your business actually becomes a business, it becomes a really high challenge that you need to monitor, utilize, and it really, eventually it affects your COGS and your price per units and
everything comes into that. It's fascinating that you mentioned that. So there's two things that I want to mention here. One, you said, well, one of the things that I realized is, as I began to talk to people who were in supply chain, who were experts there, I realized they didn't know anything about e-commerce. they were oblivious to like what that even was. And then on the other side of it, you were like, holy crap, I got a real problem, and I'm in e-commerce, and my problem is in supply chain. And so I think it's fascinating that you found kind of this crossroads of, on one side, I found all these experts, but I've found that they know nothing about me. And that was kind of what made you realize, wait a minute, if they know nothing about me, if somebody who's been doing supply chain for 20 some odd years, and they don't know anything about this new vein of thing that I'm working on, and it's a need I have, we might have a new market here, right? This is an indicator that there's a gap going on. And so this could be, true in the accounting space. For me, one of the things that I found, and automation was one of the places where I monetized some mental capital. And for me, I started to talk to just random business owners about like, oh, did you know you can, automatically take a lead from your email and push it into your CRM? And people were like, automatically, how? Like, what do you mean you can put it into there? And this, even now, it's still pretty interesting how little people understand of that concept of just automation in general. And so we founded an agency that just focused on disseminating that knowledge and getting paid to do it for you. And so I think maybe that's one of the ways that if I'm an e-commerce seller, look at my needs, look at the things that are just pounding on me to like, this would help me make my business better. And even I've had to become an expert here in this arena to make my business better. And then where you really find the gap is the people who helped you become experts, those individuals that you met at networking events, those individuals who met through a friend of a friend of a friend as you were trying to solve these problems that you literally met out of just sheer grind to understand how this even works. Those individuals not understanding my business model or my type of what's going on and saying, wait a minute, I am a supply chain expert and I've never heard of your type of business or your niche or your what's going on. That's a market gap. And the reasons I think it's a market gap is because you found someone who literally has spent 20 years identifying business opportunities and they don't know about you. And based on your other experience, that you've been to trade shows with hundreds of other e-commerce providers or hundreds of other whatever niche in e-commerce you're serving. And so I think that's fascinating, as you're describing, like, okay, found a need, became an expert. Part of how I became an expert is I met a bunch of experts, and those experts didn't know anything about my business model. So those three things,
I tell you, it's even worse than that, because they even disrespected, like, oh, e-commerce, so you're talking about those small packages? Oh, no, it's not interesting. But they forget, that e-commerce eventually, they have also full containers, they have warehouses, they have in the same infrastructure, but it's really built in a different way, different pace and different needs. But it was like overlooked for a long time.
So if I'm trying to monetize mental capital, there's a second thing I should be looking for. When you're talking to an expert, if they have a knowledge gap on their end where they're looking at my need and they're saying, yeah, that's not important or that's not necessary. Chad Rubin in a prior episode, he said one of the ways that you find these, green pastures or blue oceans is you identify a thought or an assumption that's being made in the market, and then you challenge it. You go against the grain of what a group of people believe to the point where you actually can prove, holy crap, there's value here that nobody thought about. And that's how you build a business that grows and does everything there. And he did that with Skubana in saying that I'm challenging the market and saying, I think there needs to be a more integrated e-commerce system that integrates with all of these different pieces. And he built a system for his business and then found other businesses that needed that same thing. And the challenge paid out, right? He was able to sell that business. And so I think for you, same thing. You found these experts, and there's the other way you recognize the gap. These individuals not only didn't understand e-commerce, but they disrespected it. They were like, this group of people, this market of people who had expertise here said, you know what? Logistics, I don't even care about, you guys are all about small packages. Small
Yes.
packages don't make money in freight forwarding. And so there's the assumption that you were like, yeah, buddy, I love this. You just keep thinking that because I'm about to break into a new market. Is that essentially what it looked like?
Yeah. So it was the combination of all of those things hitting me, which eventually what happened is that I built my own infrastructure. Back then, you didn't have like fulfillment centers, and basically no one could help you if you didn't help yourself. So you can even see that more, if you go back to the more high level sellers that became really big and they started a long time ago, you can see a lot of them had to build their own fulfillment centers and own solutions around supply chain and in general. And this is also something that, it's very like when you're an entrepreneur, you try to find solutions all the time, to ask the questions, to not to stop. You always need to move. If you stop, you go back. So this is like the set of mind back then. I built my own infrastructure from manufacturer to the end user, including warehouses and freight forwarding and everything. So I could sell in Europe and in the US. And I live in Israel, in Tel Aviv. And for me, it was easier than let's say the regular guy that will start to do it, just because I had connections. I know how to speak the
Yeah, that was
language.
some of your background.
Exactly. So once I had this infrastructure, slowly, eventually e-commerce is a big community. We share our knowledge together, and this is also a very important thing. Not to think that you know everything. The opposite is the right. Always assume that you have something new to learn, and this will always help you to progress. So, people started coming to me and say, hey, I need a warehouse. I saw you have this already ready to go. Can I join?
How did they see that? So the next part of the podcast, I want to talk about some of these challenges that come in monetizing mental capital. You saw the need, you saw the gap, you started to dive in on that. And part of what helps you identify, oh my gosh, I can help other people with this, is they started to ask you, how did they find you? Because one of the challenges I find is if I know something that other people want to know and they're willing to pay me to know how to do that, I've got to show the world, I know how to do this. I know how to do this so well. You should be calling me up and I'll tell you more about what I know. So what did you do that was naturally helping these people even before you started, like you were just doing it for yourself, but they started to come to you? So what was that like?
So at this point, I didn't do too much, but I did some networking, not to start with selling my business, but really just to learn from others, to get to know the community in e-commerce, and those connections in a natural talk, we're talking about their challenges. Back then, a fulfillment center, like a warehouse to manage your products and fulfillment, not from home. Once you have like 3-5 sales a day, operating this by yourself really takes you back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is so funny. I've talked to so many e-commerce sellers that are like, yeah, I got to the point where I was selling 3 to 5 pencils a day out of my house. And my wife was like, we're not doing this anymore. The entire garage is full of pencils. I don't want to do garage. I don't want to do pencils in the garage anymore. Okay. So I love that. And I think the interesting thing, what did these natural conversations look like? Did you, like you're at a conference, or where did you go to find a way to create those natural conversations, either in person or virtually, so that you could validate the need and the drive forward? Where was it that you were looking to go do that?
So it was more like those specific events where e-commerce sellers were gathering together. Back then, it wasn't similar to today, where there are so many events and also an online way to communicate through groups and social. And so back then we did have social, but it wasn't that usable as.
So today it's even easier. If you're trying to monetize mental capital today, get in the groups, look at what's there. How did you find new groups or places? And if I'm an e-commerce seller and I'm aware of a couple of different e-commerce trade shows out there today, how do I find other places where I can have those conversations?
So I think, so firstly, trade shows, and definitely I can say those are the most best ways really to get to know new people that has the same challenges as you. Some of them has been better in marketing and you've been better in something else, and sharing this knowledge, helping each other.
Mm.
Even just one word sometimes could turn on the light of something you missed and really will help you to utilize and improve your business. So networking, getting to know each other, not to be afraid just to go to this guy that stands now and drinking his lemonade in the corner and say, hey, what's up, I'm Oran. I think this is really the best way to start with. Slowly from there, you get to know people, you hear about new places, new groups, and slowly you build your network, and it's get bigger and bigger. And when someone recognizes like a specific pain that is mutual, everybody is familiar with this pain. Some of them has accomplished to win this pain and create their own solution, but everybody knows these pains, and you have this network. So things go from mouth to the ears very quickly.
Okay, so a question about that. Are you naturally an extrovert where you're like totally game to go talk to everyone at the conference, or are you more introverted? Would you say it's easy for you to go talk to the guy with the lemonade in the corner, or is it harder?
It wasn't at the beginning, but when I understood the outcome of those things, and that the other guy or girl on the other side, we are all people and we enjoy those talks. And in most cases, we also learn from it. In some cases, we even meet good friends that goes for you for a long run. So yeah, it was like an evolution with myself, that I understood how important it is for me to grow and to learn new things, and to have a great network so they can help me be better. But eventually, when I had this pain point that I wanted to resolve, so this network also worked to get what I offer outside there. So it's something that actually was built naturally. But today I can tell that and today it's very easy to approach those infrastructures of networking through trade shows and communities, and it's really out there. It's really out there, especially in ecommerce.
So you mentioned that wasn't naturally
Not
your,
at the beginning. Not at the
it
beginning.
wasn't naturally your easiest way of going out there and kind of connecting those dots. It wasn't like, oh man, I'm going to nail this and it's going to be easy.
No,
When you
definitely.
looked at those individuals, what was your first thought? Like before you realized there was a gain or an opportunity here, were you like, oh my gosh, talking to another person, they're probably going to flip me off and walk away? Or let's go back. What was your first thought when you were looking at that person who's in the corner, lemonade? What was it that made you realize, you know what? Maybe there's something here that we could actually do together that would be helpful.
I think that in the beginning, my feeling was, and I think maybe a lot of people might think the same, that, oh, he's drinking his lemonade, he's having his thoughts. I don't want to disturb him. But slowly, firstly, I saw other people doing it, and I just creating random talks around the tables and things like that. And I just decided to jump into the water. And I think for anyone that's an entrepreneur, and especially if you're trying really to take things to the next level or figure things out, speaking to people probably will be the best way to help you go to the next stage of what you are looking for. And just from there, I said, all right, let's, what could happen? I'll say hello. He doesn't want to speak with me. Probably the last time I'm going to see this guy. And yeah, and I just dived in, as we say. And sometimes this is what you need to do in order to face some things. You just need to dive and start walking the jungle.
Dive in, walk the jungle. And how many conversations was it before you were like, you know what, this is worth it?
It was obvious for me in the first time I did it that it's worth it.
Interesting.
But it took a bit, it's like going to the gym. knowing how to approach someone, do some small talk, ask the questions. So when you start, it's a bit slower, but as you go, as you do it more and more, it gets easier, and the opposite now is right. You're like excited to speak to people. You just those random talks. Really, every time I think I learn something new, I hear something new, even if it's hearing about the story of how they thought about selling their products, or what type of business they invented out of their pains. It's for me now like something mandatory that I do naturally.
Interesting. So, okay, so you found these individuals, and I want to share some of my thoughts on like the ways that I found individuals who had similar problems, and how I created a conversation that actually led to that true relationship. Because I've had so many where I just, you talk about it and you're like, man, that was such a waste of time. But I've had so many where it's the opposite, and it was like, man, I kind of want to reach out to that person again because that was such a fantastic conversation, and I enjoyed the camaraderie, I enjoyed the connection, everything that came from that. What do you do, or what questions do you ask when you're having a conversation like that to help you identify people who are going to make a difference in your life from that perspective? So that's my question, is how do you identify people, and what questions do you ask to help you make those connections?
So I think to identify like in a split of a second is pretty hard. You cannot, I don't think I'm able to do that yet. But really, when I started, I realized that people like to speak about themselves and tell the things that they're doing. It's fun. It's fun to share things that you're doing. You don't always, when you're running around your business and trying to be the best at everything in this small ecosystem you're building for yourself. Sometimes you don't have really the opportunity to share that with anyone, even if you're with your closest family. You don't have the time really to sit and share the things you're going through, and what are you doing and what are you selling. So I was like always trying to start with like not very personal questions, but really like questions that will give them the place to open up to me. And this gave me the idea, right? What is he doing? What are the challenges? What is background story? And out of that, I was like, as the conversation is going on, starting to think also about questions that, all right, this guy, hey, he knows something that I'm having trouble with my business. He already passed on. He's like, let's take like an Amazon seller, a 6-figure seller, and I'm talking to this 8-figure seller. He already has like so many SKUs, and he sells also like in multiple sales channels, and he's passed already many challenges that I still need to face myself. And
Interesting.
yeah, and from this, I was like building the questions based on the person in front of me. And like you said, sometimes, all right, I had a nice conversation. I didn't learn anything new. Maybe I met some great guy, but yeah, this could also happen. But you should take even those conversations as a positive things, because even just having a great conversation with someone, maybe in those scenarios, maybe you help them with something. So I value all of those type of conversation, but of course, you don't get like the gold idea or the gold solution at all of those conversations, but you'll never get those if you don't try. So even if you had like 6, 7 conversation and one of them gave you something that changed your business, it was worth all your time.
I love it. And one of the hacks that I want to share, and this is one that I've used on several of my different interactions, I love to get into that initial conversation. And this is true in person, online. 15 minutes I've found is enough to make enough of a connection that you can kind of go there. The first question I love to ask people is, what is the biggest challenge you are facing right now? Because I want to know if perhaps there's someone in my network or a hack that I know that could help you go there. And I found that if you start with their needs in mind, if you open the conversation that way, people open up immediately, And they'll tell you, you know what? My biggest challenge is X, Y, or Z. And often either I have seen the challenge and I can help them from that standpoint, or I go the opposite direction and there's someone in my network that I can connect them with. And if I found that the law of reciprocity is real. So if you go to a restaurant and the waiter comes up at the end and says, looking both ways, right? Like, just making sure my manager is not seeing this, and they drop some extra mints. I'm only supposed to give you one of these, but here's 5 or 6. If the waiter or waitress does that, naturally you're like, oh, I kind of owe them. And the tip for that waiter or waitress goes up because they did something for you, right? So the law of reciprocity is very important to us as human beings. I don't like to owe anybody anything kind of situation.
Yeah.
And so I found that if you're willing to give, people are willing to give back. And so that law of abundance kind of comes in and you get some connections there. Have you found similar, when you were doing your networking, when you were kind of trying to begin to really understand where the needs were out there at these trade shows, how did the law of reciprocity come in for you?
So it's a great thing that you mentioned, because it's really like something that sticks you to someone when you add this factor into it. So as I was saying, like the conversation, in my point of view, are always mutual.
So in your conversations, what's that look like? What the law of reciprocity?
So I was born in the service point of view, and the one thing that got me, let's say, the reason I was there so much time is because you're always in the position of helping someone. Freight forwarding and supply chain in general, where things go smoothly, nobody talks to you. Your game starts when something goes wrong, when something is not clear, when there's high anxious inside the story. And this is something I learned about myself, that I enjoy helping people that has complicated thing in their head, and I know this specific solution. Let me make it easy for you. So this is something I had all the time in me, and I think this is what took me from being an e-commerce seller, going back to helping e-commerce sellers, going through those challenges. And I took that to me in all the conversation, all the things I was asking, how, hey, what do you manufacture? How do you ship? Do you have any challenges with your fulfillment center? I was asking also those questions, if they were relevant, of course, to who I was speaking to, but really, really always trying to see, maybe I can help this guy also. And I think this is what grew my network slowly. And then, one satisfied customer told the other 3, hey, he has a great, you have a problem, you don't know what to do, talk to Oran, he can help you. And I think this is how I started this, let's say, my journey as someone that helps in supply chain for e-commerce companies. Like, it's a big world supply chain, but focusing on e-commerce because they had like a very unique type of challenges. And I just knew how to help them in most cases. So definitely this is very important. And in general, I believe this is something good for life. You need to give in order to get. This is how it works. And this is why the communities in e-commerce are so great, because everything is based there on sharing. Let me help you be as successful as me, as an 8-figure seller.
Yeah.
And this is something you don't really see in other business. I don't see how Nike help Adidas. Hey, come on, see how I did this great shoe that got me those high sales. It's not just that normal to share your business info, but in e-commerce, because the unique DNA of this type of business, it's okay to share.
Okay, so I'm going to send you back here. When was the first time you monetized mental capital? When was the first time you were like either a lemonade stand, back when you were a kid? When was the first time you're like, I have an idea? Because the logistics side, that's how you built the business you're working on now, and it's growing and all of us there. So this was not the first time you monetized mental capital. When was the first time you got out there and said, you know what? I bet you I have a piece of knowledge here that I can make money with?
So I actually started when I was really young, like 16 years old or 17 years old. I was trying to, let's say, save money on the side so I can fly to South America and be there 1 year without working and doing nothing beside having fun. So I said, I need to start working on that now if I want at the age of 21 to do that. And I was starting to do actually parties. It was an age where everybody want to have fun and go party. And, I had some good friends and we started doing that. And this is the first time I actually did money. It was 10,000, like if I equivalent to like the shekel, which is the money in Israel, it was around 10,000 US dollars in one night that I did it. And this is opened my eyes. It was also tricky because I was very young and I thought, oh, making money is really easy. And it's not. I also lost a lot of money in other parties, but this took me to another venture. And this is like the real first business I actually had. I was around 19 years old. I don't know if everybody knows, but in Israel, when you get to the age of 18, you must go to the army for 3 years. So different to like in the US, where you can actually go to college and start thinking business when you're 18 already. Israel, it's a bit more complicated. So like usually we start our journey like 21 plus. But somewhere at this age I was waking up in the morning and I was wishing I had some donuts and hot chocolate or something nice like bun, and everything is super fresh. And it's waiting for me on my door when I wake up. And I said, maybe other people would like to have this thing waiting on their door. And me and two of my friends, we actually built a website. Nobody knew what a website is. That nobody almost paid through credit card through the website at this time, at least in Israel. And we built like a website where you can choose what would you like to get each morning, and you would save it. And every morning, 7 a.m., we would put a bag with donuts or whatever you would like. We had like a small supermarket online, and this actually became big and big. 6 months after, we had already trucks coming like 4 a.m. in the morning with the buns from the bakeries and dairy and, many things that people would like. And yeah, this business really grew fast. People loved this idea. We did it like really fine, not just a nylon bag waiting for you on your door, but we did, like branded it and did it online, and you could follow up your orders and stuff like that. And actually I sold this business after like a year and a half.
No way.
Yeah. Me and my friend, we sold this business, and yeah, we actually, it was either continuing this business or going to college and learning. And eventually we decided we cannot do both, and we sold the business and went to learn. And I'm really happy I did it, although it could become a very big business, because some of my best friends until today that affected my life is from this college where I went to learn it.
I mean, that's amazing. And I think that's the epitome of monetizing your mental capital, when you get to the point where the system you've built is actually saleable. Like you can actually sell the piece of what you've built, and it's ephemeral, right? It's just a system. There's no, a lot of times there's no physical goods. That's amazing. Okay. Now, the next question I want to ask is kind of interesting. I want you to imagine that you could make a phone call back to this individual, back to this younger version of yourself. You're laying there in bed and you're thinking, man, I wonder if other people want to wake up and just have breakfast sitting on the front porch. Like, I wonder if other people have this need, because there you are again, right? There's a need, and I have that need, and now I got to go see if other people have that need, and you're, monetizing that mental capital, trying to connect those dots. I want to imagine that same night that it dawned on you, whoa, this could be a thing. You could make a phone call. You or Ron now could make a phone call to him and tell him something that might help him upskill or up-level his ability to monetize mental capital. What would you tell him that might help him skip some of the challenges he's faced or up-level his ability to monetize mental capital?
I think really two key things. One of them I already mentioned through our talk here, but two very, very basic things. I'm really going to the basics because I see it as like the foundations, the infrastructure that the business will stand on. And this is, of course, for my personal experience, because maybe someone had like different journeys and they occurred different things that they took for life. But for me, it really falls down to two really important things. So firstly, if there are partners in the story, you should really take a long thought about who is your partner you're going to go to this journey with. A lot of people had the idea that they sit with their best friend and they say, hey, that's a great idea. Let's do it together. And in most cases, this is not the right partner. The right partner basically should be someone that is much better than you in specific areas, that they give like a different aspect, different push to the business that you are not capable of doing as good as they are. And this is something that I really learned it the hard way, not with the donut business, but with things that I did afterwards. And I think this is one of the most important lessons, that your contract and the agreement between you should be so down to the point where if something happens, it's very clear what's the solution here. And it's very important, to do it with someone that is really give you the added value and not just a great friend or someone from your family or your partner or something like that, your partner for life. I mean, it should be really someone that knows what he's doing and gives a very big value. And the other thing I learned, and this is also something because I started really young thinking about things I can do as an entrepreneur, is that sometimes when you start your business, you think you know a lot. You think you know in specific things better than others. And you need to be someone that knows how to get feedback, listen to what people with more experience than them have, even if you don't agree sometimes with them as your first instinct. Yeah. You should listen, really listen, not just wait for them to end their annoying speech, but really listen and try to ask yourself, maybe he has something, let's check what he said. Let's investigate it. Let's double check it to make sure when I say, no, you're not right, I know what I'm saying, let's prove it to myself. And if people ignore those signals, in most cases, I believe they will say in the end of the road, oh, I wish I would listen to this guy. Yeah, and those two things, it's something I had to learn the hard way.
So to sum it up, I mean, you're saying, pay attention to who you're partnering with. Like, you're going to be with this guy for a long time, or girl, right? Like focus on a real relationship there. Be sure that you're confident and know that entrepreneurship is a long, lonely journey. So it's a good idea to bring someone in that you can trust, that you can appreciate. A book I'd recommend is Rocket Fuel, Integrator Visionary, Finding Your Opposite. I thought I was looking for my exact same copy of myself. And I found that the closer the personality to me, the more quickly the relationship ended, because they were too similar and I needed the opposite. And so I totally agree with you. And then that second side I think is fascinating. I tend to be a very arrogant individual. I know everything. That's just kind of my human nature. And so I love what you said there about pay attention to truly actively listen to that other individual. And when your brain goes, man, they are so up in the night, they don't really know what they're talking about. Stop your brain and be like, wait, no, hold on. Actively listen. This is an individual who's spent their whole life coming to this moment where you ask them a question or they felt like it was important enough to share with you. Sit back and wonder, what do they know that I don't? Right? Approach the conversation, approach their statement with curiosity instead of arrogance.
That's a nice way. Exactly. You said it as accurate as you can say it.
Beautiful. Okay. So now shifting our episode, I'm going to give you, we're going to pretend that you just stepped into an elevator with a seller and they're like, yeah, I'm a 7-figure seller and man, logistics is just kicking my butt. This is what they said when they got into the elevator. And you're going to have 60 seconds. I'm actually going to time you. You're going to have 60 seconds to basically share, what do you guys do from the logistics standpoint? Why should this individual jump onto a quick call with you, kind of look at that. We're going to do that in just a minute. So put a pin in that. In the back of your mind, we're going to hand us a question to your subconscious that I want you to kind of think about. Any tips, tricks, hacks, or books that you've come across in the last year that have changed the way you've looked at monetizing mental capital. So put that in the back of your mind. We're going to ask you tips, tricks, hacks, or books in the last year that have changed or up-leveled or helped you grow in that arena. But now I want to give you those 60 seconds. So you've just stepped into the elevator, the 7-figure seller standing next to you, and he says, man, I'm a 7-figure seller on Amazon and logistics are killing me. What would you say to that guy? 60 seconds, ready to go.
Right. So I guess it's killing you because really when you get to those 7 figures, 8 figures type of businesses, so planning the whole way I'm going to ship my products, making sure I'm staying in the inventory levels, don't go in overstock or out of stock, that I know how fast I sell my SKUs, and really making sure I ship it the right way. So those challenges are like the big challenges your type of businesses probably have. Shipping a container from A to B, it has the complexity, a very complex type of process, but it's eventually a process when you move something from A to B. But how do I plan it? How do I ship it? How do I make sure I keep my COGS where I want them and my inventory levels balanced? This is exactly what we do in Cubic, connecting to your sales channels and really helping you out, figuring out the way to plan your shipments, but also ship them.
Awesome. I got to get off here at this floor, so I'll see you next time. Good job, dude. Good job. Well, I love that. Okay, now tips, tricks, hacks, or books that have up-leveled your ability to monetize your mental capital in the past year.
All right. So in the past year, I didn't mention in this call, but I did a very big transition from becoming a one-man show that helping people with my knowledge. Really, in some point, I said to myself, I want this to be something big. There's a big need for that, a big pain. And really, I would love to make this scalable. So basically, I moved from being a one-man show to finding the right partners to build a startup company. The name is Cubic. This is what we do, or Go Cubic. This is how you find us on Google. But basically what we did is we mapped the whole supply chain. This was 2 years ago. We saw that everything was, warehousing. It's evolved in the past 10 years. It's in a good place. There are solutions. Last mile, there are solutions. And other places in supply chains, everything is integrated and super advanced. But somehow the freight forwarding and custom clearance part of the supply chain just stayed way back. And this is the point when we said, this is the part where we're going to focus on in supply chain for e-commerce companies. And we established Cubic. I have amazing partners together with me based on the experience that I mentioned before, knowing how to choose the right partners. So I have Omri with me, the COO, and Guy, the CTO. And together we actually established Cubic, which it's not just, a freight forwarder that helps you to move something from A to B. You come and ask what you need, you tell them, and they do what you do, what you ask with no questions, but actually something more proactive to integrate into your business, to understand your business, your inventory levels, where do you sell, how fast you sell your product. And when your purchase order is ready in somewhere over the world, how do I ship it? Because I want to make sure I don't get overstocked or out of stock. I want to make sure I'm super efficient and I utilize the cost, to keep my price per unit as lower as I can. And this becomes really complicated when you have Amazon, but also if you have like Walmart or a third 3PL selling on Shopify. And really all of those things together is what Cubic is solving at this point, because we really realized going deep down into the freight forwarding part of supply chain, starting to understand that the pain points is not what everybody's shouting out. Like, I'm having trouble to track my shipment. I'm having trouble to get answers. Those are like the normal troubles that everyone will say when they're trying to build like a digital freight forwarding or something like that. But we said, all right, in 4 years from now, everybody's going to be digital. Everybody's going to have tracking. it can be this is the problem here in freight forwarding. And what we discovered is, and especially in the last year, and I'm going back to where I learned this the most, is speaking with Amazon sellers. I think this
Back to networking.
endless talks, just even going in LinkedIn and saying, hey,
Yeah.
you're an Amazon seller. I have a new idea for something that might help you. I'll be happy to hear your thought about it. Like really trying to create those conversations. And what we found out is, yeah, everybody don't like to track those shipments. It's a big mess, but all right, we can resolve that. But where's the real pain? And then we saw that the planning part of it, what's going around it. All right, I need to ship,
That's
but
the part.
how do I need to ship it?
Beautiful.
Maybe I need to take 200 pieces of a specific SKU and ship them by air. And it needs to be 200 because 200 is going to be just enough until the ocean shipment arrives. And then I make sure my inventory levels stay the same and I save money and not shipping too much by air or stuff like that. So this is really where it's going on, and try to pin all those challenges around it. So for example, when you have a new product on Amazon, now
Right.
you need to go run after your freight forwarders.
So, that you obviously nailed that pain point. And the hack here is going back to the beginning of the episode, network. Build connections, find that pain, and do it by talking to as many people as possible. That would be the hack.
Definitely. I would say you would need like at least really, I think like when you have a new idea, talk to as many as you can. Like that's the first
What's
place.
your minimum? How many do you talk to before you're like, you know what, this is actually something I should pursue?
I would talk like to 50 people at least in my list, because some of them are not going to be that relevant. And some of them, and you would like as many as you can, because you always need to remember every business has their own unique type of pains, and there are the general pains that meet everybody. If you build a solution for a specific pain, you might find it hard to bring the customers to you. So you need to focus on the pains that are really mutual to everyone. And this to speak to at least 50 to 100 people, really as many as you can. Even go to trade shows, do whatever you need to get the audience.
I think honestly, that's the hack around the trade show. I think that the cool thing about a trade show is, you pay a couple $100 to get the flight there, depending on how close you are. You pay a couple $100 to stay somewhere. It racks up pretty quick. You're paying $3,000 to $4,000 probably to have that experience. But the cool part about it is there are 50 people in the room, right? Like you can have those 50 conversations in a 2-day span. Whereas if you're trying to do it on LinkedIn and connect all those different dots, you might get 2 or 3 people a day, and it's going to take you, 2 to 3 weeks. So I think that's one of the reasons the trade show is such a beautiful place to do that networking. Oran, this has been an amazing episode. You've left so many awesome hacks, thoughts around how to identify that right market and connect those individuals. How do individuals connect with you wanting to reach out? What's the best way to connect with you?
So basically, my LinkedIn is open. I'll also be happy to share my email. We always love to help new companies, even if it's just like questions related to supply chain or compliance or whatever we can help. I'll be happy to do that. My email to share it here, just to say it. So my email is Oran, that's ORAN, at GoCubic. That's GOCUBIC.io. So that's my personal email. And if anyone has a questions, I'll be super happy to help and meet new people. So
beautiful.
That's what we're here for.
Well, that wraps our episode of Monetize Your Mental Capital. Thank you, Oran, for joining us today. I'm excited for the listeners to take a peek.
Thank you. It was great.